Hello, welcome to another edition of the Hallelujah Gardening Guide. We're so glad you've joined us and trust you'll enjoy what we have to share with you today. Okay, we're going to talk about composting. And there are many materials in a spent garden that we can use in our composting process to provide enrichment of the soil. Our corn here, as you can see, has already been harvested, and it's ready to put into the compost pile or the compost bin, whatever we are using. There are two ways that you can use these corn stalks in your compost bin. You can cut them off at a high enough level so that you can come back and then pull the roots out. And we've left enough there so that we can grab onto them and pull them out before we till the ground. Or we can take them and we can cut them off at the ground level . And then we will leave the roots in the ground, and then with the composter we will break up that root material and it will break down in the soil. So once we have pulled them or cut them off at the stalk or at the ground, we're going to now, Willie is going to show what we do with them next.
Great. Well, I like to take this dry material and add it to my compost pile, but if I leave it in the big stalks, it's going to be rather difficult to do any turning with the compost. And as you know, George, we like to mix that compost on a regular basis so that it breaks down faster. So what I'm doing is just chopping these stalks up, and they're pretty easy. They're nice and dry, and I can just chop them up and then take them back and use them as one of the dry brown ingredients that I add to my compost pile.
So you want, as you build your compost pile, you want to use both the brown and dead material as well as the living and green material.
Right, that's absolutely correct. The brown materials are brown because the plant has actually senesced, because it's pulled all the nutrients out of its leaves and stalks and put it into producing the corn, the actual kernels that we eat, or the seed that would make the next generation. So this part has a lot of carbon in it, but it doesn't have as much of the nitrogen materials that we want for building fertility in our soil.
And that's where we need to go to the green material.
Right, we definitely want to add a mixture of brown and green materials. And green is the term that's used, but they're not always green. I mean, carrot pulp is a juicy, nitrogen-rich material that we add to the pile. But things like straw and bark, which we're going to take a look at soon, those items and these brown stalks are all what we classify as browns, high in carbon, and they help keep the odors down and absorb and bond onto those nutrients so that they don't leach out, and then they are retained when we put the compost in our garden.
What else can we add to help it break down more rapidly? Fertilizers, for instance, of animal origin, is that a possibility?
Those are definitely chicken manure, horse manure, cow manure. If you live in an area or you have access to those items. I know people who can't get those in particular have done and used cheap, inexpensive dog food that's, the dry dog food that's cornmeal based, and they use that to add some nitrogenous, because those usually are high in protein, which is a nitrogenous compound. So those things will help to heat up a pile and help it process faster.
Well, that's very interesting. Can we go take a look at your compost piles and see how you process it there?
Yeah, sure. We've got a couple of examples to look at some different methods, and some are more expensive than the others. Some are just easier to deal with for the home gardener. But let's take a look and see what we've got.
Why don't we do that?
All right, great. So here we are back at the compost rings that I've set up here to compost the kitchen waste and weeds and anything that comes out of the garden, crop residues, and just anything that's organic that we can use to break down and add nutrients back into our soils. And if we step back and just take a look, this one pile has been sitting here now. It's only been turned once, and it's been sitting here for probably about 6 weeks or so. And it's a mixture of layers. I have weeds, and I've put some animal manures in here. I put layers of straw to absorb the nutrients from the green material. So I've got the straw as a brown material, and the animal manures that's already been composted once I've got in here. That's going to add a little more nitrogen and help this pile heat up. But now that it's been sitting for a while, the microbe organisms that live in there are not actually breaking down. They've kind of exhausted their supply of nutrients and air, and they probably lack, with this hot weather, a sufficient moisture. So what we're going to do right now is we took the ring off and moved it to a new location, and we're going to take this pile and turn it over. And the procedure for doing that is to start by tearing off the exterior walls, because you can see those parts are still look like the original ingredient. They look like straw, they look like weeds, and we pile those up in our new ring, and we put them mostly towards the center. And the idea is to take all this unbroken down material and put it into the center, and then as we go, we can take some of the material out of the heart of this pile, and if I pull some out here, you can see, look how nice and broken down that is. It no longer has the identity of being straw or grass or weeds or anything like that. It really looks like just a mixture of garden soils. And that can go right back into our garden and be used to supplement our plants instead of buying chemical fertilizers. And once we've gotten our pile turned, the next thing that you want to do is monitor the temperature. I've got a thermometer here that I use. It's got a very long stem on it. If you can see, I'll slide my hand down to make sure you can see. It's about 18 inches long, and they do make them even longer than this. And what you do is you just insert that thermometer deep down into the center of your pile and check the temperature on it. Now, I've seen these piles heat up to 160 degrees or more, but as long as they reach 130, you're killing the seed organisms and the disease organisms that might be in there. So you can get rid of your weeds this way, and you can also get rid of any health problems that you might have had with your crop residues. So you want to see that temperature go up, and what it'll do is it'll continue to go up after you've turned the pile, and then it will stabilize, reach a plateau, and then the temperature will start to drop. And that's the time, that's how you would know personally that you need to turn that pile again to introduce more oxygen and to introduce more water if necessary, if your pile's drying out too much, so that you have a nice rise and fall until you get a good breakdown of your organic matter. And we can talk a little bit about some of the options you have for construction of your compost piles. I use these simple rings, which are made out of old wire, and I just cut a short section. For the garden, I use a ring that's 5 feet in diameter because we handle so much material here with our restaurant. That garden ring, it takes 17 feet of wire to make a ring that's 5 feet in diameter. But for a home garden, if you're not making so much waste, you could do something like this, which is only 3 feet in diameter. And this small ring is really the smallest you want to go because you need to have that volume, that mass, in order for the core to heat up properly. And these piles, this ring is really simple. Aside from the inexpensive, you can buy 100 feet of this wire for probably $40 and cut it up and make, I made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rings out of it, easily. But this has simple, I usually just bend a few prongs over. I don't use all of them. That way if they break off from being bent over and over, I have others to continue replacement of it. and use, and this ring will last a long, long time. So all I have to do to move this pile and turn it is undo the fasteners, move my ring back to a clear spot, and you'll notice that I've set this ring in a place where I have very poor soil and grass doesn't grow. So I'll set my ring up. I'll just bend over just a couple of those prongs, and I'll just take my pitchfork and I can turn this pile over and get some air back into it. And if necessary, I can add some water. I can add more dry material and more nitrogen, just depending on how the pile is doing.
Now we're going to go look at a tumbler. This is a much more, it can be used in a nicer neighborhood or where neighbors might have a concern about you having these open compost piles. In fact, this tumbler type composter is what I have at my home. Let's go take a look. As you can see, these are very nice looking. You open them up and you put your composting material in there, and then you close them back up. Batten down the hatches, and then we simply rotate this. They're very easy to turn, and we do this on a daily basis, and this takes the place of turning a pile over like we saw Willie doing just a few minutes ago. And so this is a more sophisticated, better looking, and easier way to do composting. The only problem is there is a cost much greater than the wire that we saw Willie use in making those round composting bins.
I think we've given everybody a good idea of some things they can do to add to their fitness program today.
Absolutely, not only their gardening program, but their fitness program.
That's
there's
right.
a little bit of exercise involved, energy
right, no matter what method you choose.
That's right.
That's right.
Thank you once again for joining us for another episode of the Hallelujah Gardening Guide.